feed all our people. No way we're going to feed all our people by having this. We have to change into a market society. But let's not call it a market society. What they came out with at that point, 20 years ago, with a motto, and it was, to be rich is glorious. To be rich is glorious. And what happened is, people they started to very slowly create a market economy. And the way they did it, no one had any money back then. So what they would do is you might have great guanchi connections. And you would go in and you would meet with the local politician. And that local politician would give you land and funding in order to build some housing for the local factory. Then when you built the development, the factory would buy it from you with all of the, would buy all the housing from you, and you would make a profit. And then you would go down to the market and you would buy your fruits and vegetables. And all of this type of thing went on. So we started to create a market society. Now, I was give you an idea of just how quickly people can become rich in China. I met a gentleman at a flea market, and he had a kiosk that was about as big as this stage. And what he sold on it was little gadgets, like silly little things like a lighter with a flashlight on it. Right? And I went out, and he had a kiosk, and he told me he started with his first kiosk 5 years ago. And now, and all day, like this is a place where I guesstimate probably like 500,000 people walk through this section every day. Like, it's not unusual. With 1.4 billion people, there's a lot of people everywhere you go. Okay? And so he would go in, and the place is always busy, people picking up. And I said, how many of these kiosks do you have now? Over 1,000. Over 1,000 of them. And I asked him, and I pushed a little further, and I said, well, how much? I went out, got to know him a little bit, made him part of my guanchi. I said, what do you make a year after everything? He said, over $30 million. Okay? What's your background? Well, I came to the big city, and I started, and I worked very hard, but I come from a farming background. Now, he's a rare case, but that's what's going on right now. There's massive growth. So there's massive consumption. Now, we have a fossil fuel-based economy. The planet is 5 billion years old. Life has been on the planet for 1 billion years. Humans have been on the planet arguably for 2 million years. And the oil age has been 200 years. And we're very quickly, over the next 200 years for sure, running completely out of oil. So, a little bit about the supply. Let's just go geographically around the world and talk about quickly what's going on with oil around the world. Well, first of all, let's start with the most famous place on the planet. Let's start with the Middle East as far as oil goes. Oil-producing export countries. All right? Well, let's talk about who's the biggest oil supplier. Saudi Arabia, yeah. Well, within Saudi Arabia, 60% of all the oil in Saudi Arabia comes out of one well called Ghawar. G-H-A-W-A-R. And out of Ghawar, what they did 20 years ago is they used to pump in 1 barrel of water to get out 3 barrels of oil. Now, they have to pump in 15 barrels of water to get out 3 barrels of oil. Now, for those who do not have a background in geology, what that basically means is they are losing pressure on the reservoir. What that means is you have a very mature well. But yet the Saudis say we have oil for a lifetime. This can last forever. We can always have oil to supply to the world. Well, they introduced something 20 years ago in the Middle East called quotas. Quotas. And what quotas are, based on the amount of oil that you have in your reserves, that's the amount of oil that you can sell into the world markets on a day-to-day basis. Miraculously, overnight, all of the Middle Eastern countries closed their books. And they came out within days and reported double the amount of oil they actually had. And that allowed them to sell more. Well, the second largest reservoir, and we know the problem here, Gore is a very mature reservoir. If Gore was to shut down, and we really knew, or there was a major problem with Gore, oil would be over $200 a barrel. And these are the trends, these are the things I'm looking at, always trying to get information. We will never know. Because it's called, the only one who actually knows how much oil there is the Saudi Arabia family. No one is allowed to go in and do an independent audit. Those are the scary things that we as Americans and Canadians just do not know. We are going to move from a world of globalization to a world of localization. Forget about eating strawberries in January in a cold climate. It's not going to happen. The reason is you cannot afford the high shipping costs and transportation costs to get that food there. So what's going to happen is, eventually, we're going to be looking at localization, like Whole Foods, I think, the grocery store. It has its farms nearby. I'm touching on environmental stuff because you touched on it in the beginning. I'm trying to cover as many different topics as I possibly can in the shortest time possible. Okay? Make sure. So, what happens, and thank you, I appreciate that. And what happens is we are going to have to start looking at, instead of shipping by truck, we're going to have to start doing it by marine or train. And those are the socially responsible things that we have to do for the environment that makes sense. But we don't get it yet. You know, I'll tell you a funny story. When the price of gasoline skyrocketed, they had more cars running out of fuel on the highways than at any other time. And the reason was because people were driving down the highway and they were looking for the best price and trying to get to the best price before they ran out of gasoline. What a way to live your life. What I do is I set my life up so if the price of oil goes up, I'm happy because the members are making lots of money. Who'd like to live their life like that? Okay. You see, I can tell I live very close to a gas station. And whenever the price of gas goes down, when I'm driving home, it takes me a few extra minutes to get into my driveway because cars are lined up like down the street to save a few pennies. What a miserable way to live your life. I want to live in abundance and a full life, and I know you do too, and I want to teach you how to make money for yourself. But you got to understand the trends, and you got to understand what's going on in the world. And that's what I'm teaching you, and will always teach you. So, let's keep going. The second largest reservoir on the planet is called Bergen, B-U-R-G-A-N. Now, that produces 2 million barrels of oil a day. Stop. 12 months ago, the Kuwaiti oil minister came out and he said, oh, by the way, when they came out under the quota system and they said that we could produce this forever, they said, we will always be able to produce it. We got so much oil. 12 months ago, Kuwaiti oil minister came out and said, we can only produce 1.7 million barrels of oil per day, and that number will decline, continue to decline over time. Let me give another example. The Middle East is always tense.